Every other day I wake up as a girl called Kate. Part 1. I'm writing this from a bed that doesn't belong to me, on a phone I don't recognize. I'm sitting in a dimly lit room with posters of bands I've never heard of, with cupboards full of clothes I've never worn. I've stopped pleading to the people who call themselves my parents that I'm not who they think I am after they threatened to take me back to the hospital. I'm starting to think they're getting serious now, and if they send me off I may be there a long time. These posts have to be secret from everyone in this house. I am writing here as I have nobody else to talk to. It also might help me to make a log of everything that's happening. My real name is Emily. I am 20. I live in my university dorms with my roommate, Astrid. A ridiculous but extremely pretty girl from Norway. Actually, I never drank before I met Astrid. She's the kind of person who you would turn your back on at a party for 5 minutes and before you know it she's dancing in her bra on top of a pool table pretending the pool cue is a stripper pole. Deep down I think she is just a good girl who is a long way from home and enjoying her freedom. If anything, I envy her. I don't think anyone wants to see my pale body with my top over my head, and I'm totally fine with that. But back to me, there's not really a lot to tell you about myself really. I'm pretty average, well, I was until last week. I'm medium height, slim and have very fine light brown hair. This reminds me of being 14 in chat rooms and people asking me for my ASL or stats. I'd of course lie and tell them I was a hot blonde with long legs and long luscious hair. I am in university studying to become a nurse. I've always liked caring for things. As a child I would bandage my cat's paw up and check his temperature and take care of him until he got better from whatever illness I made up on that day. Nursing seemed to suit me. Now I need to talk about Kate. This will sound crazy, it is crazy. Last weekend I went home to my parents' house. It was my mom's 50th birthday. Their house is the total opposite to my tiny dorm room in the city. They live in a wooded area with a view of the ocean through the gaps in the trees. Something I have always missed since leaving home is the sound of the waves or the tree branches in the wind. The sounds I hear in the city of drunks shouting at each other in the street or car horns beeping don't quite live up to it. The party was absolute chaos with the whole family showing up, people I haven't seen in a few years complimenting me on how I've grown up and how proud they are I'm in university now. And of course the occasional "have you got a boyfriend yet?" I don't. In fact, I'm pretty useless with guys. One of the guests was Martha, an old colleague of my mother and her son Eric. God, Eric is the biggest mummy's boy I've ever met. I swear she still dresses him. She's obsessed with the thought of him and me hooking up. She doesn't say it in those words, but so many times she has tried to get us alone together. Of course I have no interest. I have set my sights on only one man, and unfortunately he is the most unattainable person at UNI I know, my lecturer. I know it's wrong, he is married with kids my age. I know. But there is just something about him. Perhaps the fact I can't have him is why I adore him as much as I do. It was 11 p.m. and the party was starting to dwindle. I took the opportunity to go to my old bedroom and go to sleep. I was exhausted. I'd done nothing all day, but the social aspect was mentally draining. I'm very awkward in social situations at the best of times, but spending all day with family was the most draining experience for me. I felt like I could sleep for days. And so, I got into bed and fell asleep. And that's when things started to get weird. That's when I woke up as somebody called Kate. I woke up Sunday morning in a pool of my own vomit. My head hurt so much it felt like tiny people stabbing me in the brain with needles. When I was fully awake I didn't know where I was. My hair felt long. I had an unfamiliar ring on my finger. Even my hands looked different. I can't even explain to you the kind of confusion I felt last Sunday. It was like lucid dreaming. Have you ever had those dreams where you suddenly become aware you're in a dream? Sometimes if the dreams are good, I will take advantage and start flying, flying over cities and towns, making the most of it before I wake. But this was different, it was so vivid. And I wasn't waking up. I looked around the room, the sunlight was seeping through the pink curtains with suns and moons on them, and I could see dust floating in the air. I was in a house on a busy street, I could hear kids outside playing football and hitting balls against the walls. Where the hell was I? The walls were lined with posters of models and bands. There was a laptop on a desk at the end of the room near the door, and next to it a full-sized mirror. I darted up off the bed and stumbled over to the mirror. My feet looked bony and pale, with dark blue shiny nail polish perfectly painted on every toenail. My legs felt sore and ready to buckle under me. When I got to the mirror, I can't begin to describe the feeling, it was beyond terrifying. Standing in front of me was someone I had never seen in my entire life. She was like a puppet mimicking my exact movements. Looking back at me was a ghostly pale, painfully thin girl with a pretty but worried face. Her hair was like something I lied about on shrooms as a teen, long thick brunette hair down her back. The more I examined her, the more I realized the porcelain face looking back at me was actually quite beautiful. She lifted her chin, a thin gold necklace with the name K sparkled in the line of light coming from the window. Her eyes were blue, with a dark shadow under them as if she hadn't slept in weeks. Her nose was small and pointed upwards. It had these tiny freckles which lined the bridge of it. I was pulled out of my trance by the smell of bacon wafting into the room. Once again I thought I would vomit. Had I really drank that much the night before to not only be this sick, but to also be hallucinating right now? I ran back into bed and pulled the covers over me. There was something cold under my skin. It was an iPhone. It definitely wasn't my iPhone unless I'd taken a hammer to it and cracked it in my sleep. I turned it on and it asked for my Thumb ID, which worked and unlocked the phone that definitely didn't belong to me. I looked through text messages and photos. It felt like a total invasion of privacy to go through someone's life like this, but I just couldn't stop. With each scroll I started to learn more and more about this person in the mirror. Just as I write this, I have received a text from someone she attends university with. His name is Theo, and from his Facebook I've just learned that he is a film student. He is 23, and judging by his status updates, he doesn't sleep much either. Are you out tonight? Is the text I received? I won't reply for now, I need to think this through properly. Anyway, someone is coming up the stairs. I will share more next time, regardless of who I am when I wake up. Every other day I wake up as a girl called Kate. Part 2. I am freaking out. I am writing this from the library at my university. I walked out halfway through my lecture because I couldn't focus on anything other than what happened this morning. Something very disturbing has genuinely spooked me. I desperately want to tell Astrid everything, but I can't bring myself to face it. Yesterday I woke up in that same room, just like I had for the first time on Sunday. I have worked out some things since we last spoke, and these are the answers to the questions I've asked myself many times. First of all, it has happened every other day so far. For example, I woke up in Kate's bedroom on Sunday, then Tuesday, then Thursday. But I am still very much conscious every day of my own life as well. It's as if I repeat days when I am in Kate's life. Kate seems to have no control over my life, and I have no idea why it is only me who is experiencing this and not her too. When I went to sleep in my room in my mother's house on Sunday, I woke up in Kate's room and it was Sunday still. When I went to sleep that Sunday night as Kate, I woke up back in my room on Monday morning. Can anyone work out the significance of this? I want to think it is just a series of bad dreams, but so many things have happened to make me believe it isn't. I woke up this morning utterly exhausted. It really feels like I am living two lives. I fell asleep for a split second standing up in the shower this morning. Astrid startled the hell out of me when she barged in and stood there brushing her teeth and talking to me with a mouthful of toothpaste. We are very open about that stuff these days. I used to be the kid who would take a towel to change out of my swimsuit in the girls' changing room in school, but Astrid is the kind of person who looks at me like I'm a freak if I go into my room just to change my top. I'm used to it by now. Besides, she will barge into rooms no matter how much I tell her not to. Privacy isn't her thing, and I like her too much to try and change her. And this is part of the reason I don't want to tell her. I like her so much that I don't want to see that look in her eyes. The concerned Emily, are you okay? Look. Yesterday when I woke up I felt that familiar feeling of dread wash over me as soon as I opened my eyes and saw the posters all over the walls and realized it wasn't some weird dream. The bed sheets were different, this time plain white, and the room had a faint smell of lavender. Probably Kate's stepmother, she stinks of lavender. I haven't told you much about her yet. From what I have gathered, she works in an elderly home for the wealthy. She seems to hate everyone there and even joked that she wishes they would just die already. She is a short, stumpy-looking woman, but she is quite attractive. You can tell she likes to look immaculate with her perfectly clean and ironed clothes, complemented by her very expensive jewelry draped over them. This family is nowhere near rich though. The house is clean and well kept, but aside from that it's a very average home. Of course I haven't had much interaction with her, though. I stay in the room as much as possible, they don't seem to mind. I am too terrified to even speak, as hearing a voice that isn't my own come from me makes it just too much for me to handle. One thing that strikes me about the room is that it's so cold. I've had to turn on the radiators even though the sun is shining through the windows. As I got out of bed I could hear the tinny sound of music playing through cheap headphones laying next to it. Spotify was open and the song All Medicated Geniuses by Pretty Girls Make Graves was playing. I'd never heard this band or song in my life before that. And now, in you and I find myself playing it in my head even as I write this. I felt a sense of panic start to set in when I was fully awake, a feeling I felt for the first time when I was 7 and the teachers left me behind during a school trip. They only forgot for less than 3 minutes before the overly sweet Mrs. Truby ran back, apologizing like crazy. But I never forgot that overwhelming feeling. It was like the whole world was huge and terrifying, but also tiny and claustrophobic at the same time. This was it again. I felt trapped in a huge unknown world. And please believe me when I say it has taken me so much to somewhat accept that this is happening. If I could hear myself saying this I would wonder what hospital I escaped from. The iPhone at my side said it was 10:16 a.m., too scared to leave bed but too scared to sit there alone in that room. I decided I would try something. I wondered if I went back to sleep, maybe I could just wake up in my own room, in my own life again. I tried so hard, and I eventually dozed off. When I woke up, a man was peeking his head around the door from the hallway. But this wasn't a man I knew well, and this wasn't my door frame. I was still in Kate's room. The disappointment absolutely crushed me, and then the panic hit again. Oh God, what if I never leave? The man was her father, a tall, slim but worn-out looking man. His features were quite gaunt, as if he works so hard he forgets to eat and sleep. But his mannerisms and his voice were gentle and soft. He asked if I was going to UNI today. Maybe. I don't know. Was all I could blurt out, in this voice I didn't even recognize. I felt a little guilty for being so blunt with him. He seemed a little hurt by my cold response. But I don't know how to reply to a man I've only met a few days ago. I don't even know where UNI is. I waited until the house was empty and wandered around. My bony feet were cold on the wooden floor. I am getting used to feeling so cold all the time. All my bones ache constantly. It's peculiar how this looks like the body of a young woman but feels like that of a 90-year-old. I was tempted to change into something warmer, but going through her wardrobe was a mission in itself. It's hard enough trying to dress myself, let alone someone else. The TV was left on, The usual crap daytime TV with people trying to auction old antique watches and clocks. I went further into the kitchen and I found some food in the fridge. It was a leftover of somebody's pasta from the night before. I was starving, a weird hunger I haven't felt before. But I have to admit, as I ate it I felt this incredible overwhelming feeling of guilt. Guilt for what, I don't know. But I couldn't brush it off, and with that I bent the food and put the dish in the sink. I never waste food, this really isn't me at all. I hurried back up the stairs and got back into bed with her phone gripped tightly in my hand and began looking through her videos and photos, before going back onto her Facebook. Suddenly the thought of trying to search myself, Emily, crossed my mind, and before I knew it I was frantically typing out my name in the search bar. What if I can contact myself? Then I can prove to myself once and for all that this is happening and that I haven't lost my mind. And so I did. I found myself. Oddly, it was an old profile picture, but it's probably a glitch. Sometimes Facebook doesn't update people's photos for a few hours, although this one was particularly old, at least a couple years. My profile was private, naturally. People call me paranoid for this, and let's face it, there's not exactly anything interesting on my Facebook that randoms would want to search anyway, but it makes me feel happier to know only my friends can see my activity. My only option was to send a message to myself, Emily. What on earth do you write to yourself when you are in the body of someone else? Definitely an issue I never thought I'd have, but I looked around and wrote the first thing that popped into my head. Lavender. After my shower altercation with Astrid this morning, I ran out of the door clutching onto a slice of toast which had gotten butter all over my hands. Great start. But I was late and the first class was with Philip, my favorite lecturer. Never before have I looked forward to attending a class, at least not before I first walked into his lecture last summer and felt my heart race just at the sound of his voice. Yes. He is a beautiful man and it is almost impossible to take your eyes off him, but I'm sure that's what his wife sees also. So I must stop getting carried away. I shook it off and rummaged through my bag looking for my notebook. I realized I'd left it at home. My mind is literally elsewhere recently, so instead I grabbed my phone so I could type in my notes and email them to myself. That's when I saw it. A little red circle with a 1 over the Facebook Messenger icon. Oddly no notification. I opened the Messenger app, totally ignoring what Philip was saying, and I saw nothing. I saw messages from Astrid and other UNI friends but nothing new. So I scrolled further and way back. 2017, 2016, 2015, and there it was. A message sent from Kate at 13:04, June 2015. Lavender. I felt sick, and still do. I don't know what is happening, but this is really starting to freak me out. How can it have been sent from 2015? And what will happen if I reply? Talk soon, Emily. Not like other girls. Josh swept Laura's coat off of her shoulders and hung it in the closet. Here we are. Smiling at her with affection, he inquired why. She nodded. He paused, holding her gently. You know, you're not like other girls, Laura. There was a tender kiss on her forehead, and he left. Laura watched him go. Over the last 5 months, she'd come to believe that he genuinely adored her, which made her happy. His adoration was all she wanted. The sound of clanging metal erupted from the kitchen, followed by a cheerful whoops. From Joshua. Laura chuckled as she went into the den and made herself comfortable on the couch. While she waited, she heard a clinking noise coming from the closet. She looked towards the kitchen, assuming Josh would come in any second. He didn't. The clinking persisted. Laura scanned the room, and hesitantly approached the closet door. The doorknob was old and required a good strong twist, but she was able to get it open. She was greeted by an unexpectedly musty smell. And an unmistakable breeze, wafting towards her from behind the coats and knickknacks in the closet. Curious and surprised, she pushed the coats to the side and gaped when a set of stairs was revealed. The jingling continued, louder now. Laura looked behind her cautiously. Once she verified Josh was still in the kitchen, she noticed a light switch on the wall. She flicked it on and descended the hidden staircase. The jingling grew louder yet. Laura stared in horror. Chained to the wall were 4 women. Dried blood was caked around their wrists, ankles, mouths, and eyes. Some had rudimentary surgical scars crawling up and down their bodies. 3 were unconscious, she hoped, and hung limply. 1 was awake, but barely. She weakly moved her arms, causing the noise. Laura's heart jumped into her throat when she recognized a hummingbird tattoo on the woman's inner wrist. Before she could move towards the captive women, there was a voice in her ear. "See, Laura, I told you you're not like other girls," Josh said. None of the others were as dumb. His words were cut off by an elbow to the face. He staggered back to the stairs and fell to his knees with an ungainly thump. It was enough time for Laura to locate a fireplace poker that was leaning against the wall and land a disabling blow to his skull. Laura stood over the prone figure, breathing heavily, a look of disgust on her face. She swung the poker wildly and hit his unmoving body a few more times, but the sounds of metal against flesh and bone did not assuage her rage. She threw the poker aside and stomped on his feet and hands, relishing the sounds of delicate bones cracking. Then she fell on top of him in a straddle position, beating his chest and face and slamming his head into the concrete floor, over and over. 5 months of pretending to care about this fuckface, of dinners, laughing at his jokes, kissing him. 5 months of concealing her true motives. Her skin crawled thinking of the times she walked arm in arm with him. She stopped and took deep breaths, the way her therapist had coached her. It took a few seconds for her to process everything. She had never expected to find this room. She had never expected to find anyone, really. She'd specifically told herself to only look for information, afraid that if she hoped too much, the disappointment would crush her. She dragged Josh's body to the wall and secured him with an empty set of shackles. Grim satisfaction rose in her mind as she realized those were probably for me. Well, not today, motherfucker. Miranda had gone missing almost a year ago today. The police had been little help. With the high rate of disappearances in their city, a small part of her understood why. Their parents, destroyed by the loss of their daughter, were similarly unable to do much. Therefore, Laura had taken it upon herself to investigate Miranda's online presence, starting with her email. She found messages between Miranda and an unknown man on a dating website. Half out of reckless desperation, Laura made her own account one night and contacted him as though she was just another single ... and that was how she'd met Josh. It was a precarious few months. She'd given him a different last name, never introduced him to any of her friends, pointedly ranted a couple of times about how she'd never use Facebook or Twitter, made sure he was never able to see the name on her credit cards, thanked her lucky stars that she and Miranda didn't look much alike. And it had paid off, more than she could have ever dreamed. She went to the conscious woman and opened the manacles, held her when she fell to her knees, emaciated and weak. "It's okay now, sis," Laura said softly. "I'm here." "Are you the lovely lady I just saw exiting the shower?" "I'm a 21-year-old girl who lives alone. I exercise twice a day, I eat healthy, I get enough sleep and I take my vitamins. I like to think I'm smart, at least, I'm not a complete moron. I read books and I speak my mind and I write. But all it takes is one sentence to reduce me to a victim. Tonight I took a shower, like every night. My bathroom is directly across the hall from my bedroom, so it takes half a second to step out of the shower, into my towel, and into my room. Towel hit the floor. I rummaged around for my nightie. I was exposed for maybe 30 seconds at the most. Another 30 seconds later, someone buzzed up to my flat. It was after midnight, so I ignored it. I live next door to a bar, and drunks tend to play with the buttons on their way home. But the buzzer kept on going, to the point where I wondered if it was a friend in trouble. I answered the intercom, but didn't unlock the front door. Hello? Hello? A very slurred, English, male voice. Are you the lovely lady I just saw exiting the shower? I didn't understand. I literally didn't comprehend what he was saying. So I said, what? He said, in that confused way drunks sometimes talk, I just wanted to ask if you were the lovely lady who I saw through the window. Who the fuck is this? Something in my brain was telling me to panic, but I was too shocked to register it. You don't know me. My name is Redacted, and I would love to give your lovely body a massage. Please, please, let me inside. I slammed the intercom phone back into the cradle. The hallway felt a strange mixture of claustrophobic and exposed. As the intercom buzzed again, I sprinted into my bedroom and dove beneath my duvet, door slamming shut behind me. I reached out from beneath the blankets to my window, and managed to close the parted curtains entirely. After a minute, the intercom went silent. It took another minute for me to phone my parents, an entire country away, and then 5 more to phone the police. Unsurprisingly, they couldn't find him. That drunkard is probably sleeping off the alcohol right now in some plush hotel bed a couple streets away, memories mingling with dreams. I'm in bed, my front door chained and bedroom door locked. I love my flat. It's small and cozy, and half the walls are windows. I love the way the natural light pours through during the day, and at night I love watching the stars. Every curtain is shut right now. Every door is shut, for added visual obstruction between rooms. I'm not scared. I am angry. I'm angry that no matter what I accomplish, no matter who I am or what I've done, all a man, a stupid, drunken oaf, needs to do is leer at my naked body through a window, and I am reduced to a powerless victim. He could have taken photos. He could have broken down the front door. He treated me like a creature at the petting zoo, and I hate him for that. Epic. Don't follow vultures. When I was younger, about 10 years ago, I got into bird watching. I was about 12, so it wasn't really official by any means. I was just some kid that liked to sneak up on birds, take pictures and look them up in books. I decided to start this hobby by making a list, with pictures I had printed from the library, of native birds in my region. Every weekend I'd wander around the neighborhood, which was suburbs smashed haltingly against large plots of land covered in brush, in search of new birds. With a few ponds and a large creek in the area, I found quite a few within my first few weeks. However, there was one bird I had set as my sort of white whale due to its rarity in the area, the black vulture. We have tons of turkey vultures in my area. They are most common, but much fewer black vultures. They are a bit hard to tell the difference if they're flying too high. The best was to determine which vulture it is has to do with how much gray-white is on their wings. If they got closer, you can eventually make out the red head of turkey vulture, as I often did, disappointingly. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the exact date, or what month it was even. I believe sometime in the fall, however, but one weekend, I decided to spend the next 2 days searching high and low for the black vulture. I went climbing over the small wire fencing around a nearby brushy area, as per usual, keep out signs be damned, and searched. Usually you had the best luck finding scavenger birds on roadkill, beside the road, and there so happened to be a small, 2-lane winder that mirrored the creek nearby, just through the foliage. so I cut across the sort of mini forest, headed in that direction. As much as it made me sad to see a dead deer, or possum, it was a common sight on this road, as both sides are open, with trees and undergrowth almost choking it. There are some parts of the road that almost become a sort of tunnel, due to the leaves intertwining above. It was incredibly easy for a deer or some other animal to jump out in front of a car, in the dark, with neither party realizing until it was too late. I didn't have much luck. There were a few crows on the snare of a squirrel, and I saw a few ducks swimming the creek beside me, but nothing big. It started getting late, but the sun was still up, and despite the dangers of walking down a forest road in the dark, I was determined to stay out as long as possible. I decided to reach a small park area at the end of the road, and then I'd make my way back. I went under a small tunnel of leaves, and came out the other side, and was delighted to see the familiar shape of a large bird in the sky, circling. It was just the right shape and size to be a vulture, but I had no hope of checking for the grayness of its feathers, as the sunlight was limited. Instead, I was stuck following it as it slowly began to sink lower. After about 10 or so minutes, it landed, and I carefully snuck forward, cautiously avoiding anything that could alert the bird of my presence. I sunk low to the ground, realizing that the bird had landed in a small clearing at the far end of a park. It was just a small, open field, slightly tilted down a hill, with the parking lot on the top. I had been there before, as it was a fun spot for kids to roll down the hill, because of how steep it was. I approached it from the bottom, excitement brimming when I heard several squawks and shrieks of other birds. Black vultures are more aggressive than turkeys, and I was hoping to catch a spat. I got to the edge of the clearing, and pulled out my binoculars. Two things kind of hit me at once here. One, I found it odd that they were in the middle of the park, rather than closer to the road, where you'd assume they'd find roadkill. Though, I reasoned, things could die anywhere, even in the middle of a park. However, secondly, it smelled awful. The scent was rather light, but I've been known to have a really sensitive nose, and just this sharp, coppery scent, like when you pull rotten ground meat out of a bag. I had smelled roadkill before, and in the heat of the day, it smelled bad, but nothing like this. When I put my binoculars to my eyes, I expected a deer corpse, and birds fighting. I never in a million years thought I would see a corpse of a completely different kind. The birds were there, and I remember the faint pang of excitement I still had, recognizing the proud head of a black vulture, before the image of it sitting on the chest of a naked woman sucked the life out of me. I was frozen, and I could not look away. My throat timed with vomit, and I could not look away. The birds had done surprisingly little to her body. She had what I think were cuts, but most of her was intact. What wasn't, the birds were at. Her eyes, lips, and genitals were red and shredded. If there was a big defining wound, I missed it, between the gathering of birds and the fading light, but what I did see I can never forget. I haven't forgotten. I can pull up the image so clearly now, even after all this time. She was pale, almost blue in places, with blonde, crinkled hair. I sat there, stupidly, for who knows how long, as the sun sunk behind the trees. This was a time before cell phones were a common thing, and I had quite the hike back home. I realized now I was in shock, and I could only move when the sudden fear that whoever did this could be nearby hit me. I forced myself to slowly waddle backwards into the trees, not taking my eyes off the body. I didn't want to turn around, for some reason. I was so scared someone would be behind me. I thought if I just backed up forever, maybe nothing would happen. It was dusk. And suddenly, there was light. High beams, from the top of the hill, a single pair. I heard the screech of tires as the car wheeled out, and listened to it veer off to the left, and away, down the road, opposite in the direction I was headed. That was the last straw, and I ran the entire way back the second I could no longer hear it. I crashed through at least a mile of brush, and while I was smart enough to have had boots and thick jeans on, my arms were bare and bleeding by the time I stopped. I paused midway through the brush by my house, realizing that, embarrassingly, I had pissed myself in fear at some point, before nearly crawling my way through people's yards to get home, avoiding all passing cars. The horror didn't completely end there, as I was home alone until past midnight, as my mom worked late at a diner nearby. It's stupid, and I regret it to this day, but no, I did not call the police instantly, nor my mom. I was stupidly afraid that if I did, my mom would get mad at me, I would never be allowed to go outside again, or worse, that they wouldn't believe me for some reason. I locked all the doors, double-checked, took a quick shower, and locked myself in my room. I had fallen asleep, somehow, by the time my mom came home. I confronted her in the morning, at least, but by the time, when we made the call together, the body had already been found. They took my statement. We never got any calls back. I stopped bird watching. I tried my best to find an article, or news somewhere about this, but I failed in finding anything. It probably doesn't help that I can't remember the exact date. I have a lot of missing time from ages 12 to 14 for some reason, which I can't even begin to explain. There are very few things I remember so well, this being a big one. I have never shared this story with anyone outside my own family, but I thought it might fit here, and I apologize if not. It was sort of therapeutic, I think, writing this out after so long. I'm going to keep trying to find something to verify this, and I'll update ASAP if I can. The Man in the Yellow Raincoat. My mom's friend lived in an apartment complex in Seoul. She was a stay-at-home mother with a young daughter, and her husband worked during the days. One day, she was coming home from running errands with her daughter and got onto the elevator in her building. When she got on, she noticed that there was a man wearing a cap and a yellow raincoat, and he kept his head low so that she couldn't really see his face. She immediately felt really uneasy, and she made her daughter stand to her side, furthest away from the man. What made her feel even more uncomfortable was that when she pressed the button for her floor, there was no other number. And on top of that, she noticed that he was carrying something wrapped inside newspaper close to his side. Things started to click in my mom's friend's head, and she started to panic and decided to take out her cell phone and pretend she was calling home to her husband, who was obviously really not at home and at work. She started saying things like, "Oh, I'm on the elevator and about to get off. Can you get the door for me?" and making it seem like her husband was waiting at home. When the elevator did reach her floor, I think she lived on like the 12th floor or something, she quickly got off and grabbed her daughter and started to walk as fast as she could to her apartment. She noticed that the man also got off on her floor and was slowly following her down the hallway. When my mom's friend got to her door, she started to bang on it and shout, "Hey, Yobo, husband/dear, I'm home. Please open the door," and kind of pretended like he was coming to answer the door. Upon seeing this, the man in the yellow raincoat started to walk away back towards the elevator. When he seemed to be far away enough, my mom's friend quickly picked up her daughter and slid open her door's passcode thingy. This is usually how people get into their homes in Korea, and started to frantically punch in her key code. But the problem was that the buttons would make sounds, so the man knew that no one was going to answer the door for her, and he turned around and started to run back towards her. My mom's friend, at this point, was practically screaming, and when she finally got her door to open, the first thing she did was throw her daughter in through the door. When she got in herself, she saw that the man was pretty much inches from the door, but she managed to shut it and lock it before he could wedge his hand or weapon into the door. Afterwards, looking through the door's peephole, she saw that the man was walking away back towards the elevator. Several months later, my mom's friend was watching the news and there was a coverage on the capture of a serial killer named Yu Young-chul who used to kill a lot of prostitutes. She told my mom that she could never forget the dread she felt when she saw the too familiar yellow raincoat and hat that he was wearing when apprehended. His girls. My parents moved into our house about 6 months before I was born. When I was 4, my sister came along. It was an idyllic childhood for 2 young girls, and most of our days were spent in the large oak tree on our front lawn. Then there was Sammy. Sammy was about 7 when I was born, lived next door, and I had severe mental retardation. This isn't going to sound nice, but we were a little frightened of him. He was a big kid, and very loud and strong. My parents explained why he was like that, and he was never malicious, but we just didn't understand. One thing that freaked us out was that he would often watch us as we were in the front yard. In hindsight, that was our saving grace. One summer morning when I was 8, making my sister 4 and Sammy 15, she and I were out in the front yard as usual. We were making tents for our American Girl dolls. Lost in our work, we didn't notice the man with stringy, oily hair watching us from the sidewalk. "You little girls having fun?" he asked. We nodded silently. Stranger danger embedded thick in our skulls at that time. "What's her name?" he prodded, pointing at my doll. "Molly." "Mister, we have to go inside now." I yanked my sister up by the arm. "See you later," he replied. We ran into the house, leaving our dolls outside. The man was all but forgotten after lunch when we went back out to play. Except Molly's clothes were missing. I thought stupidly that maybe a squirrel had taken them, when we heard someone clearing their throat behind us. It was the man, and he had Molly's clothes. "I need those back please," I said, to which he replied, "Come get them." It wasn't smart to go up to him, little sister in tow, it really wasn't, but I wanted my doll's clothes back. Of course, the second we got close, he grabbed both of us by the arm and started yanking, pulling us towards the creek that ran on the other side of the street. My little sister was screaming. I was in shock and must have felt like a bag of cement, and I clearly remember thinking, wow, Mommy's going to be so sad when she can't find us. A great lurch from behind threw the man off of his feet, and he and my sister went down while I unsteadily held my ground, spinning to see who it was. It was Sammy, and he was fuming. He kicked the man, grazing my sister in the process. "Nobody touches my girls," he stuttered, kicking the man again. The guy took off running. Sammy scooped my wailing sister up and took my hand, and walked the 2 of us back to our house where my mother was frantically running onto the lawn, having seen the end of the encounter. The man was never found. Sammy passed away last year of a heart defect he had long suffered from. There wasn't a dry eye in town. I had to pretend she was my daughter. I'm currently a UNI student, and on Tuesday nights I come home pretty late. Not late enough that my parents would call the police, but just missing the regular bus times. Anyway, as luck would have it, I managed to catch the very last bus one Tuesday night after getting to the station, and typically it's nothing to be worried about. If you keep to yourself and stick to safe-looking people, e.g. other UNI students, mothers, bus driver, you'll be right. Growing up in a dangerous country and migrating to a much safer one hasn't rid me of those instincts. And that night I got all bad vibes and buzzy. Something was off about that evening and I didn't know what. We get to the main stop, the shopping center, and I find out that the bus has terminated its route. It's done for the night. Thanks, asshole bus driver. Well, fuck. It's dark, it's late, I can't drive. My parents can't pick me up, they're at yoga, and I'm too broke to afford a taxi. So I decide to walk home. The exercise will be good for me. Now from the shopping center it would take me a good 20 to 30 minutes to reach my house. If I power walked, I could probably run home, but fuck that. When you leave the shops, if you follow the road, there's a local Catholic school, a public library, a public school, and a few bus stops along the way. Near the library is a traffic intersection, the most brightly lit area of this entire road. But it's also a very small square. It's a joke, honestly. As I'm walking, it takes me less than a second to realize how fucking dark it was on that street. It was a bit creepy walking by the local Catholic school with their massive fucking crucifix in the middle of a huge mass of land. In front of me is the girl who looks about my age, Asia, and she's walking fairly quickly. Understandable. From the corner of my eye across the road I see a man kind of half jogging, half walking, and I'm not sure what he's up to, but it was just weird. I kept an eye on him and the girl. At the intersection, my friend is there and he greets me enthusiastically, a hug and a kiss on the cheek. He momentarily distracts me from the weird running dude and the girl. Between my friend and I greeting each other, I completely miss when the guy crossed the street and is in my path. My friend turns out to be a douchebag friend and just leaves even after I've told him about the weird dude. I'm not far from the creep and the girl now, but he's talking to her. And if a guy has any common sense, he will not speak to a girl, woman, while she's alone at night, because we've all heard the horror stories. By this stage I've quickened my pace into a sprint, holding on to my backpack so that my laptop inside won't make so much noise, and I'm assessing my very limited options on how to save this poor woman. I'm a very small, very unintimidating Asian girl, and the guy looked taller the closer I got. I felt very tiny and incredibly stupid for doing this because I was still kind of far, but I have crazy good eyesight and the streetlights were hitting his face so I could make it out accurately enough in case I needed to identify him. He was a white male, early 30s to 40s, brown hair, wearing glasses, striped long-sleeved top and brown khakis. His eyes were really big though, kind of like that face you make when someone surprises you with something particularly scandalous. And I come up with what was probably the most stupidly brilliant plan I've ever concocted. I kind of stand there, hoodie on, feet apart, hands on my hips, and my best, loudest impersonation of an older Filipino woman getting mad at her child with the strongest accent I could. Honestly, if I were a bit taller I might not have gotten away with this. Boy, what are you doing? Huh? You were supposed to be home already. And talking to a boy and he's white. Excuse me, look at me while I'm talking to you. I did not raise you like this. And I don't remember exactly word for word what I say, but I'm basically copying whatever my mom says when she's angry with me. The entire time I'm yelling I can see the guy trying to inch away, and the girl looks so bewildered, like a deer caught in headlights. At this stage honestly I'm expecting her to run away. I turn to the guy. And where you think you're going, huh? Putang I will crush your titty. He fucking ran for IT. Like I swear, it was like watching a cartoon. The girl was still standing there and I took off my hood and waved to her. I was still far away and asked if she was alright, in my regular, not very Filipino accent. She was just staring at me. I apologized if I scared her, but I had to get him away because my younger sister would tell me about a creepy guy that corners young girls in the park not far from where we live. Anyway, we hugged and exchanged names and numbers, and now we're basically friends forever. It turns out that she doesn't live very far and didn't even realize what was happening until she couldn't get away from the creep. I ended up walking her home, and from there, her older brother dropped me off. We called the police while we walked to her place. When we retold the story to our families, at this stage I very correctly assumed they were Filo as well, so communication was easy. They banned us completely from taking the bus past 7. I was reluctant in telling my friends this because I knew they'd laugh, but it was such a serious thing. What if I wasn't there? As comical as that sounded, She was really shook up but very relieved and grateful. She kept hugging me and stuff. Which is weird. I don't usually hug strangers. Police later stopped a nondescript station wagon about 20 minutes down the main road. In it was a man matching my description. They searched his car and found a few photos of girls in the glove compartment and even more on his phone. They were all Asian. Specifically Filipino. Months later, after I found out about this, Mom tells me that they actually found photos of my sister and I. It made me shudder. If that creep ever came near my little sister, I would fuck him up. Longy was home alone. It was the middle of summer and my parents had left for the weekend to go to our house in the Cape Cod. It's about a 2-hour drive away, so it's no big deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had made some cold pork and pasta for me to heat up to eat whenever, and I had some money if I wanted to order a pizza. Things were all good. The first night I was alone I stayed up till 3 in the morning playing Xbox, so I woke up really late the next day. I checked my phone when I woke up and saw it was a little past 1. I had made plans to play some street hockey with my friends at 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I take really long showers, so when my parents are gone I go mental. I was in there for about 45 minutes on my phone scrolling through Reddit and Twitter and whatnot, when I heard my front door open. The bathroom is directly up the stairs from the back door, and the thing is pretty loud when it opens and closes. I immediately froze, since obviously I was supposed to be alone. I waited for about 2 minutes, ears trained and trying to hear anything else. Nothing. I figured it was just the wind or maybe my parents were home early, so I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check it out. So the stairs to the kitchen, where the back door is, are pretty tight and walled in, so it's essentially like walking down a tighter version of this but replacing the rail with a wall. So I can't see into the kitchen when I walk down. Even though my house is old as shit and each step on the stairs makes a super loud creak, I still took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. I probably took 45 seconds walking down all 12 of the stairs. So when I get to the second to last stair, right before I could see around the corner into the kitchen, I take a little breath to compose myself. In my mind I knew I was being stupid. There obviously wasn't anything in the kitchen. There's no way I wouldn't have heard another noise, and there's no reason for them to still be in the kitchen even if there were burglars or something in the house. After sort of mentally chastising myself for being such a wuss, I sort of chuckled to myself for being so stupid and just normally walked the last 2 stairs and turned the corner into the kitchen. Standing about 2 feet away from me in the middle of my kitchen is a man staring straight at me, perfectly still, with a massive smile across his face. Just staring at me. The thing I remember most vividly wasn't his face or his smile but his arms. They weren't just at his side, he held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I've ever seen. They were where one would normally hold their arms, but he had rotated them to the point where they were almost completely reversed, as well as lifting them up and a little behind himself. I don't know why I remember this so much, but it's just the most demonic, abnormal position I've ever seen. Honest to God, I think I almost had a heart attack right there. Looking back I can realize how fucking creepy this situation was, but in the moment I just took a step towards him and punched him as hard as I could in the jaw, sort of half slapping, pushing him towards the ground. The second I connected, I beelined up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen with my heart beating out of control. I fucking sprinted into my room and locked the door behind me. I quickly put the chair up against the doorknob like you see on TV. Almost without thinking I immediately called 911 and, nearly in tears, told the operator what happened. As I sat on the floor of my room, in practically the fetal position, Staring at the door, praying that a cop would be here soon. I noticed the light coming from the gap between my door had stopped. The fucker was standing outside of my door. There's no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow across the bottom of the door shift in tiny ways. I stayed balled up, staring at the gap, praying the man would go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the 911 operator was asking, "Hello? Sir, sire, are you there? Hello?" I didn't want to make noise, and even if I wanted to move my arms to bring the phone to my mouth, I don't think I could have. Eventually the light returned to the gap and I heard the faintest of footsteps, slowly creaking the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It was silent for minutes as I just sat there curled up, unable to even speak. I heard banging on the front door and the sound of 2 officers entering my house. I finally felt safe, and I opened the door to the 2 of them standing there. I almost cried. Nowadays my parents don't even leave me home alone anymore, thank God, and I check every lock on the house before going to bed. I still get nightmares occasionally, and my heart starts racing whenever I see someone standing still, but I'm doing alright. Even working with sketch artists and a few lineups, the police never found whoever the fuck was in my house. That sends shivers down my spine every time I look outside, half expecting to see him standing across the street smiling under a lamppost. I have no idea what he wanted, or who he was, but regardless, let's not meet ever again. Dad. My mom left my dad when I was 9. I have 3 older sisters. My dad was an abusive alcoholic. He used to beat us all, especially my mom. He would twist hickory switches together and bake them in the oven before beating us with them. My mom finally got the courage to leave him. We stayed in a shelter for a while for abused women and their children. After my mom saved up enough money for us to move, we moved into a mobile home. Our first night in our new place, 2 of my sisters and I were watching TV. My mom was in the kitchen and my oldest sister was cleaning out the bathtub. My dad came through the front door and put his finger to his mouth saying "SHHH." We were very afraid of him, so we didn't say anything. He went into the kitchen and said, "Karen." My mom turned around and he showed her a gun. She screamed and ran down the hall towards the back door. He told her if she didn't stop screaming he would kill the kids too. My 2 sisters and I ran out the front to the neighbor's house. We told them what was happening and it dawned on us our older sister wasn't there. She got there maybe a minute later. When she heard our dad's voice, she laid down in the tub. My dad shot my mom 5 times, killing her. My oldest sister said he went back up the hall calling our names.